Hello and welcome back to Babbling by the Brook. I'm Mark Hobie, Paper Mill's producing artistic director. This week, for something new and different, I'm delighted to host a multi-talented family with a long Paper Mill history. Rick Sordelet, Broadway's most prolific fight director, is here, and he's brought along with him his two sons, Christian Kelly-Sordelet, who has joined him in the family business of stage combat, and Collin Kelly-Sordelet, who's a Broadway actor and a Paper Mill Conservatory alumnus. Hey guys, so good to see all of you. Rick, Collin, Christian, the Sordelet dynasty, as I was thinking. Thank you for joining me today to talk a little bit about, I think, a really fascinating part of the theater that a lot of people don't know about. So Rick, we've known each other for many, many years. I think we first met on Beauty and the Beast, the Broadway production. Is that right?
That's right.
When I don't even remember what year that was, 90 something.
It was 90 something. I think in the 90s we always just say 90 something. Okay. But you were fight captain for the show.
I was the first replacement in the Broadway company. Then I took over the role of Pepper Shaker. I loved that show. And I was the fight captain and the understudy for the stunt beast.
Yeah.
So, which was fascinating. But, and we'll get to this in a minute, you and Christian have an entire company that now is fight choreography, not only on Broadway and off Broadway, but TV and movies, all of that. Incredible. And I'm going to get to that in one second. But Collin, we've known you since you were just a wee lad. How old were you when you started here at Paper Mill in the education program?
I was 14, so it was about 11 years ago now.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were in our conservatory program.
In the conservatory program, yeah.
New summer program and New Voices.
Yeah, 2009.
And then went off and have become a Broadway star in television and film and all of that too. Which is, hey, it's all great. It's good. Don't be shy. But anyway, so Rick, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about, you're a fight director. What is, tell us the title you like to be known as.
I'm glad you brought that up because there is a difference between a fight director and a fight choreographer. A fight director is a term that I always enjoy when I work with you. When we just recently did Beauty and the Beast, you were so wonderful as a collaborator in giving Christian and I an opportunity to direct the fights. You came in, you had very specific ideas of what you wanted. Then you put us in a room and said, here's what I'd like the audience to feel. Here's what I want it to look like. This is the area that we're going to be fighting in. This is how much time you have. See ya. And then we directed the fights. Whereas sometimes we'll work with a director who will actually get up on stage and show us the moves that they want, in which case Christian and I will then choreograph what the director wants, and then we become fight choreographers as opposed to fight directors. So it's a delineation between how the collaboration works, and that determines what we're doing. We're either fight directing or we're fight choreographers. And though they seem interchangeable, they're actually not. And those of us who are in the world, that's the little hair we split.
Talk to us a little bit, just the basics of what you do. When do you need someone who has you and Christian services? Any kind of physical activity? Just for people who might not know how you enter into the creative team of anything, a musical, a film, a TV show. When do we call you? I mean, I know. But...
Right. So let's say Christian and I did Kiss Me Kate on Broadway. And the thing that was interesting about the Kiss Me Kate on Broadway is that they were going to take this wonderful piece that has been around for, since like the 40s, I believe. And it's the take on Taming of the Shrew. Now they wanted to make it more palatable for today's audience. And so they were making changes, which of course culminated in the fight scene when Kate and Petruchio have their big scene, and the two actors portraying Kate and Petruchio they play it out in the play within the play. So Christian and I started with the conversations with the director. And the director in this case was Scott Ellis. And Scott has worked with Sordelet Inc. many, many times. And so like you and Paper Mill, we have a long relationship. So there's a trust. Sometimes we'll work with a new director and we won't have that kind of trust yet. And so it all starts with communication. We want to hear the story. Once we hear the story and we understand what the director wants, then we're able to start to put together how we can facilitate that. A better example is the Beauty and the Beast we did at Paper Mill. Even though I was the original fight director for it, it was very important to listen carefully to your version and interpretation of the story, which was different and had many facets that had never been discovered before. And it was very interesting for us then to go back and say, well, let's try these new things. You wanted to see what it would look like with a sword with Gaston. That was so much fun for us because we never got to do that before. The way you use the set to turn was another aspect of the piece that was new for us and made it unique to Paper Mill's production. And Christian, what were some of the other things that you saw that we needed in the communication part when we talked with Mark?
I mean, definitely the first thing for us is always going to be, what is the vision of the director for this particular piece? You know, learning from you, obviously, that we like to say the director is the hub and the other departments are the spokes of the wheel, right? So we have to always work around what is the hub, who is driving this ship, and where do they want us to go, and what does that want to look like and feel like, and all of those elements. So that's usually the first part of the conversation for us, whether it's a new director or somebody really familiar. It's, you know, just that first step of, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What do you want everybody to experience in this moment? And then that gives us the best sense of how we can accomplish that. And then in the case of Beauty and the Beast, it was really great to have Mark in the room for the most part as we were building these things. So then that way, it just helps to keep us on course, right? So, you know, maybe because we're always going to just try to throw as much pasta against the wall to see what sticks. And it's always really good to just have somebody who's helping to just keep us steered and go, no, that's a little bit too far on this edge. That's a little too far on this edge. Let's just keep going this way. And Mark always just does that so beautifully.
Yeah, that's what I love. I was saying in a couple of these chats, I've said the best part of my job as a director is when I'm actually an editor. When I bring in creatives, whether it's fight director, dance choreographer, or actors, and set them a path and give them the freedom to move along, and then I edit and sort of pull things together. So Beauty and the Beast was a fascinating project for me for a million reasons. One, Rick, you and I had worked together in the Broadway company, and I knew that show. I'd been a swing and then took over in one of the roles. And then we were doing a whole new production of it at Paper Mill. And I think fight direction, fight choreography, to me, as an audience member, is a little like sound design, which is that if it's really good, you don't notice it, right? It just feels like a natural part of the action. But what audience members have to sort of pick apart is anytime there's physical activity, whether someone grabs someone by the arm, or, you know, a woman slaps a man across the face. It doesn't have to be, you know, rapier, you know, big actual sword fighting. It's any of those physical activities where, for safety and for the art of it, you want to bring in a professional such as you guys, who are, I mean, I know how to hit somebody, I guess, slap them across the face, but not in a safe theatrical way. And also you have to do it 8 times a week, right? And people have to, you know what's coming. It has to be planned and plotted. And one of the things that you are always big on, Rick, and Christian too, we worked as a team on that production of Beauty, which was great, is the permission, right? The permission of each actor who's involved in that physical activity knows what's going to happen and what to expect, right?
You bring up a really great point, Mark, and that is, in terms of process, what are the steps? And so when Christian and I start to break it down, now that we've heard from you, we understand your interpretation of the story, then the next step for us is assessment of the actors. We take a look at who's doing what and what are their capabilities physically. Because sometimes what Christian and I will encounter is we have a director's vision that may not be sustainable by the physicality of the actor. So what Christian and I do is we start with what's sustainable and safe that can then be theatricalized for stage. It's different with film, and Christian can speak to this a lot more than I can in a lot of ways, because when you're dealing with film, you're dealing with a take.
Right.
And Chris, what would you say is the number of times an action piece will get a take? I know there's no definitive number, but
yeah, it's well, I can say in our experience, most of the time for television, like you want to be able to get it no more than 3 takes. So 3 takes is usually like a luxury. That's like, you know, ideally 1, 2 if you need to, 3 is like, okay, this is really going to be it. Television schedule is really different than like a theatrical film. You know, television schedules, you got to shoot 30 pages in a day sometimes. So it's very fast paced. It's kind of like how Tech Week is for theater, but every day. And then, you know, theatrical filming, I've worked on projects where, you know, you're on take 10, take 17, take 25 of a physical action. So I think the sustainability aspect is really important no matter what the platform is. Even for television, if you're only doing it 3 times, if someone gets hurt and they can't do it a second time, that's going to be extremely problematic. And also, I mean, just from a liability standpoint and an insurance standpoint, like, we're not doing our job well if people are getting hurt. So it's really in everyone's best interests when we just want to make sure everyone's safe, comfortable. And in my opinion, that's when everyone's doing their best work too, is when they feel confident and relaxed and capable to, you know, accomplish what's being asked of them.
Well, Mark had touched on that too, with permission. And so consent is a huge part of every rehearsal, no matter whether there's physical action in it or intimate action in it, or even verbal consent is sometimes important. And as Christian pointed out, when actors are at their most comfortable and safe is when you get your best work, which is one of the things that we've always experienced at Paper Mill, is that, you know, Paper Mill strives for a very safe rehearsal experience. And that's something that, you know, we really take our hats off to you, because I wish it was like that everywhere. But you really, like, Paper Mill as a process, just, we can count on it being a very safe place to work. And you insist on our creativity being in that kind of a place. So once we get to sustainability, safety, and theatricality, and everybody's feeling comfortable, then we work towards making this your vision, getting the fight to where you had talked about it as best we all can. And then, as Christian pointed out, we have these other spokes of the collaboration wheel that we work with. So costumes, sets, lights, sound, all comes together under your jurisdiction to make sure that the overall picture is what you were hoping for when you originally conceived it.
And I have to say, certainly with Beauty and the Beast, it was, and there's a lot of obstacles on that. As you said, you know, the set we were working on was revolving while the fight was happening. The Beast, is that the fight's actually done by a stunt beast, not the actual beast, who's wearing a mask, so his vision is, you know, not completely clear. There's costuming, there's wigs, and then in that moment, there's a body switch too, where, you know, you have to switch out the stunt beast for the real beast. So it's a very complicated piece in that show. But what I appreciate working with both of you on that process, and in the past with you, Rick, as well, is it doesn't matter to you whether it's just one slap across the face or whether it's a huge fight sequence like that Beauty and the Beast. It's the same care. It's the same process and steps leading up. There's always, we have to come to the same place. We have to agree. There's consent. We're all on the same page. And then we move forward step by step. Whether it's one move or whether it's several minutes of fighting like it was in that. And I just want to say, because I did look at your bios, that I counted over 140 Broadway and off-Broadway productions that you guys have been involved in. That doesn't even mention the regionals. Over 1,000 TV episodes and film. And in Paper Mill alone, I just want to name off some. I'm not even sure we got them all, but Beauty and the Beast, which we talked about, Ever After, Les Mis, Peter Pan, which was one of my favorites with you, with the flying fight sequence with Peter and Captain Hook. Ragtime, Man of La Mancha, I'm Not Rappaport, Death Trap, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre. There's probably more, but those were just some of what we've done with you. So like you said, there's a trust among creatives and among producers. And especially with something like this, I think it's important because a lot of performers learn a little bit about dance, learn a little bit about singing, some about acting. They have their feet in all that. For many people, learning how to fight properly is new. Some of them may not have any experience walking into the room, and you have to lay that on them, make them feel comfortable. And then in the end, like I said, like sound design, I always notice bad sound design, right? If the sound is bad, then you're like, wow, what's wrong with this? But if you hear every word and hear every note and you've loved it, you walk out and then you have to think back, wow, that was great sound design. And I think about that too with fight direction and choreography. If there's a sequence and it feels so natural, like it's just happening in front of you, that's great. So I have to say with you, that's what I always expect and I always get. And I want to we can go back to some of the shows because I want to talk about some projects that you guys found exciting or challenging. But, you know, Collin, you were with us as a young man in our conservatory program, and we knew you as a singer actor. And actually, you brought forward the whole fight directing part of it into our conservatory with the kids. And it was your initiative that brought that in. So I'm sure you remember that, right?
I do, actually. I remember speaking with Michelle Mosset, who was our choreographer and was doing the dance section. And I remember discussing with her, I put together this whole little fight. I think it was right after Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which, you know, seems incredibly, you know, I think it was the right move. I think it was the right segue into a fight, right? But yeah, no, I mean, being steeped in stage combat my entire life, it felt like a natural progression. And what I'll definitely say, back to what Christian and my father were speaking about, of the comfortability in the room. And when in the rehearsal space for Paper Mill in the conservatory, there was always this opportunity for learning and growth, and an opportunity to fail in a safe environment so that you're able to develop confidence. And I can absolutely say that I was incredibly shy going into Paper Mill, and didn't really was very uncomfortable in my own skin. And it really helped to kind of develop more confidence on stage, and then also in myself as a young actor, as a young artist, just having the opportunity to speak out ideas in a room and actually be heard, and be given a platform to be able to be understood, and to possibly utilize some of those ideas, and to feel like a collaborator, and to be treated not just as like maybe a shy little petulant child, but rather as a young artist. And that was something that I just really appreciated, and continued to give me a lot more confidence as I move forward in my career.
I don't remember you ever being petulant. I do remember you being shy. And I do remember when Michelle said, oh, Collin wants to work with some of the other students on a fight sequence in our section. And I said, great. Now, and there was even some sword fighting in that. Broadswords, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think we did, maybe it might have been rapiers. I don't really remember. I think it was just something that we were inspired to do and wanted to kind of utilize, just perform a little bit, have a little fun with some swords.
But what was great about it, and I have to say, is that was an all dance section, I remember, and there were several different moments in it. And I don't remember specifically how it wove together, but there was a natural moment that broke out of, I guess it was Supercalifragilistic into this fight. But what was great was, I'll bet most of those students had never been involved in stage combat until that day. And then I do remember you stepping up, because I walked into a rehearsal one day that you were leading, and I thought, wow, that's that shy Sordelet kid, where you had obviously, learned a lot from Christian and your dad, and you were in a teaching role then, handing over knowledge to these kids. And it was a spectacular moment in the show that was created entirely by you, because I don't think any of those other students knew anything about.
I can't speak to maybe their knowledge prior, but it was definitely a pleasure, and to have an opportunity, and again, just a platform to be able to work and to try things out, and to again, have a safe place to fail. It was definitely just such a lovely experience, being given a chance to just be heard and to work and to play.
Well, and I do remember that I don't think your dad knew that you had done that till he came to the concert that night, because then I think it was in the first act, and you grabbed me, Rick, at intermission and said, "Well, what? That was my son." Do you remember that moment?
Oh yeah, it was a really big moment, because Collin was he didn't really bring it up, and I think it was part of the deal, was like, just wait, don't want to talk about it, just want you to see the work as it is. And so that was really exciting for us. Christian, were you there that night as well?
I was, yeah. I remember it really well, because none of us knew. I think there was a surprise for the whole family. And I remember it was, you guys had epee blades with saber handles that you brought out at some point. It started with a hand-to-hand fight, and then people just broke out swords at one point. And I remember it being like really good. Like, I was really surprised. I was like, whoa, this is really good. Like, I guess he's really been picking up a lot. Yeah, I just remember being really impressed, and it was. I remember it was like with some of the stronger dancers. So it was like you could see that they had like really good moves. I think somebody did like a kip up, or like there were like some kind of crazy like athletic moves in that as well that I recall. But it was I remember it being a good fight, and all of us my dad and I were looking at each other like, was that him? What is he? So since then, I mean, Collin's actually worked with us a pretty fair amount. Like, if he ever has free time and we're on a job, which as per your data, Mark, it's pretty frequent apparently. Thank you for gathering that, by the way. I was like, man, I knew we were busy, but that's
on paper you're busy, like crazy busy.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, I guess. But yeah, we're not. We haven't really been counting. But yeah, Collin has been a really great asset to us in the business as well, because, having someone who has so much experience as an actor and having to do these roles with sustainability on Broadway, and being able to witness that firsthand and seeing the amount of energy that takes out of an actor. And like, I mean, I was aware of it before, but when I'm actually like seeing him on his downtime and seeing how tired he was, and like what it would take to just kind of prep every day for the show, and then what the exhaustion level was afterwards, really was inspiring, and very much like has been a thing that I take with me, and I'm sure my father takes with him in terms of how we build these things and what we're thinking through in the long run. So
Collin, you've had a fair amount of success, on the big Broadway, starring in The Last Ship, working with Sting, and then you were just recently in The Ferryman.
Yes. Yeah.
And I assume, busy, well, not busy right now at this point, the fact that nothing's happening, but I'm sure there's many projects on the horizon, but, yeah, fingers crossed. But Rick, I was just talking a little bit, one of my favorite collaborations that we did, and just sort of fight sequences I've ever seen, was on the deck of the ship, Hook's ship in Peter Pan. And I remember you came to me, and when we were doing that brilliant production with Nancy Anderson and Doug Sills, who was spectacular. And you said, you said, I want them to fight, but I want Peter to be flying while he's fighting. And I was like, okay. But it was spectacular, and just so exciting to combine not only the skills of those actors with the combat, and that was actual swords. I don't know what type of swords you call them, but the fact that Nancy was flying all over the ship and they were fighting was pretty incredible.
Luckily, we had the great Paul Rubin as our aerial choreographer.
Correct.
Who you know, he and I have collaborated on many shows, and that was something where that was a dream that he and I had had for years. Can we ever do a flying fight sequence? And actually,
Well,
Christian,
the answer now is yes.
it is.
Can
So
be done.
Christian, Collin, and I, and Paul, we actually went out to the University of Northern Illinois and worked with Tracy Hall. And we did a huge workshop based on fighting and flying, inspired by that production. So your production actually gave us like, oh, we need to take this further. And there was one point where Christian, we actually put Christian in a harness with a camera, and he was flying with the two fighters and shooting the fighting as well. And so it was a really interesting opportunity for us to push the parameters and see how far we could really go. In the Peter Pan production that you're talking about, when you have actors like Doug Sills and Nancy, I mean, now you're talking about the cream of the crop. Somebody like Doug, oh my, you're like, wouldn't you just like to spend the rest of your career just working with Doug?
Yes.
That's how I feel. Any chance I get to work with Doug, I'm like, I will do this for free. But Doug is one of those very rare actors that brings so much to the table, is extremely skilled sword fighter, as an amazing physical specimen. So he brings it all to the table. Nancy, same way, and they were both game. And that's the key thing, is when you have actors who are willing to try. And a lot of times when young people work with Chris and I, and then sometimes with Chris and Collin and I, you know, the thing we keep trying to emphasize to them is that you don't want to start with, well, the problem is. You want to start with, yeah, let's try this. Let's see if it works. Can I add my artistry to your idea? And not edit it before you try it. So that fight we had a great deal of fun with, had a lot of fun putting it together. You gave us unbelievable opportunities, and you allowed it to blossom into something that I have never seen and haven't been able to duplicate on any Peter Pan since.
Well, I think one of the proudest things for me, I loved that production, I loved that cast, loved working with you, is that fight, which was so unique, and also the fight we did for Beauty and the Beast, you guys did, I watched. But in that, they were new inventions of things that had been around for a long time. And were whole fresh takes on what that was, and that was exciting. And a couple things I just want to talk about, because Peter Pan, what I don't think people realize is the way that the actress typically who plays Peter Pan flies is it's two people, one who's an up and down person and one who's a side and side person. So in addition to the two actors who were doing that fight, there were two crew people who had to fly Nancy to the right moment for those fight moments to happen correctly. So there was a lot of people working together to create that excitement. And like you said, it's about yes and at the beginning. And everybody was on board with that. The crew, especially when they realized, oh, this is not just a fight on the deck, it goes in the air. And there was one point where she walked down like the railing of the stairway and was sword fighting, and was just amazing. But one other thing I have to comment, because I remember that when I invited you into that production, you did it pro bono. And that was very moving to me. You said, I want to give this gift to you, Mark, but also to Paper Mill as a recognition of our longstanding relationship. And for you to invest that much time and energy and talent into something and give so much of yourself really was incredibly meaningful to me and to the organization. So I hope I said it at the time, thank you, but I'm saying it again. So
now I want to thank you for something that I don't think you're aware of.
Oh, okay.
But I'm Native American. My sons are descendants of Native Americans, and the way you handled Ugga Wugga Wigwam was so beautiful. Then you took out all that offensive language, you made it about people, not about natives, and you softened that whole thing that could have turned into an ugly thing, and you didn't. You didn't let that happen in the rehearsal. You were very honorable and respectful to my descendants and all those native kids who may have saw the show. We're never gonna walk out of there feeling demeaned, and you did that, and it was a very special thing that started something, because a lot of times with Peter Pan, I recently did one in Pittsburgh, that came up. The dancers didn't want to do it. And we talked about it, we talked through it. And what was our choreographer's name again?
Patty. It was
Patty.
yeah.
Patty Colombo.
Patty Colombo.
She again, yep, lovely. And she was directing this, and she brought that spirit to it as well. And so that's an important part of it. And it's one of the things that I think is coming out of the pandemic and now the protests, is this ability to look at the bigger picture. Peter Pan's wonderful. Children, adults, everybody loves it. We cannot cancel it because of that. Instead, what you did, long before it was even fashionable, is you turned it into something very special and about the enthusiasm of two cultures coming together without it being about natives. And I thought that was just great. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's funny, I remember that, it's certainly in all of our lives now with Black Lives Matter and everything about everybody needing to be sensitive and understanding and respectful of the differences of our cultures. And the only way we are going to grow as individuals and as a nation is through understanding, through compassion, and coming together, and really out of a place of love. So I appreciate that. That means quite a lot to me. Yes, I loved working on that with you. And Patty Colombo, amazing choreographer, and again, very sensitive to being, like you said, they're not cartoons, they're not caricatures. We are all people, right at the bottom. So before we wind up, I wanted to just offer you guys the opportunity to talk about maybe something that was a challenging show for you, or something that was a highlight for you in terms, not something that I directed, but something in your careers. Certainly Collin, you as an actor, and then Christian and Rick, you as fight directors, that we haven't touched on. We should start with Papa, since you're the leader of the dynasty.
Oh, well, you're so sweet. There's two things that pop into my mind. One was Christian and I had the good fortune of working with Liesl Tommy on Macbeth at the Shakespeare Theater in DC. And Liesl brought, it was pretty much an all person of color cast. Macbeth was set in an emerging nation out of Africa. And then Liesl, like you, we have a relationship with her. It's really lovely. And she set a very wonderful base for the witches and how to create the witches. And I watched Christian in a room come up with an idea to create like the CIA out of the witches. And he came up with a PowerPoint for the scene where we're casting a spell. But the PowerPoint was all these weapons and seduction of power to bring Macbeth on board the CIA's version of how his country could be. And so Christian epitomized what you want out of a fight director, in that we were allowed, by the good graces of Liesl Tommy, to explore something and bring it to her. And she gave us great latitude to be creative. And watching Christian just knock it out of the park was one of my favorite moments I've ever had as a fight director. Christian was involved in the second one.
I'm sure as a father.
Well, as a father, it was off the charts. I've been so proud of my children, my daughter Kaylin as well. But my kids have been awesome. I'm so lucky that they have such a great mom, and we've raised some really great kids. But the other thing that Christian did is he has served as the fight director for Three Musketeers twice now that I've directed. And like you as a director, I was able to just say, "Here's what I want. See ya." And he presented both times fights that exceeded my expectations. And I have to admit, I'm a little jealous that these fights were really way better than I could have done. So those were two moments that were real big highlights for me. Obviously, Beauty and the Beast, I don't know, you do know that we're working on the new 25-year reunion, Beauty and the Beast. We're gonna bring it back. Same creative team. It's gonna be so different. Obviously, I'm not allowed to talk too much about it, but it's going to be very exciting. But it's nice to, it's kind of like that movie Space Cowboys, where you have all the old people that know analog, and they have to go up and fix the satellite because none of the young kids know how it works. That's what we're like. So we're having a ball with that. So that would be my contribution to your question.
That's great. Well, I played Pepper on Broadway in the original production. I'm available now to play Salt.
That's
Christian,
good.
do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would love to just talk for a minute about getting to watch my dad direct for those Three Musketeers productions, because that was just just a magical experience both times. He's somebody who working with him my entire career and seeing his storytelling ability is one thing, but then watching him be at the helm of a project like Three Musketeers, which is all very action-packed. It's I like to say I think it was probably the first action comedy in genre. But and he just took it and ran with it so well. And I was very proud of the fights that we were able to accomplish there. But so much of that was because of his generosity as a director in knowing the importance of these moments of conflict and what we glean about the characters through the way that they fight and what happens in those moments. That was really what enabled that. And also, of course, because I've been working with him now longer than I haven't been working with him throughout the course of my life. I understand, you start to understand palette and style and like what this person likes and what they're going to latch onto. And I think most importantly, we've always learned, through my dad's teachings of taking the sort of Meisner credo of behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances and moment-to-moment realities and existing in that, and just really seeing what makes sense and letting that blossom and become a domino effect into the next thing. So that's always been our process and how we go through it. And that was just an extension of that. So everything that I was able to do for those projects was only because of everything that he had laid out for me ahead of time.
And Collin, you're just starting your career, young man.
Yeah. Having the opportunity in The Last Ship to, collaborate with such phenomenal artists such as Sting and Joe Mantello and John Logan, Brian Yorkie. It was such a phenomenal opportunity, and being so young and having the opportunity to really just create and originate a role was just mind-blowing and just a dream come true. And then also The Ferryman, most recently last year. That play is dense in the best way. Like it's one that I still read now and again, and even having been in the show for 7 months, I still pick it up and reread it all the time because it has such heart, and I think it speaks so universally. And just the process of working on that show in particular was one of my favorite things that I've ever done in my life, between the company and the creative team that I got to work with. But really just the family, not to sound too corny, but the family that was genuinely created in the company over our 6-7 month period of doing the show. And so much of what you saw on stage was just an extension of what was happening backstage, of everyone laughing and playing games. And one of my favorite moments was going downstairs into the green room, which we had below the stage. And it was just before the big family feast. And there was all these different generations of actors playing cards and playing with the babies and just laughing. There was a goose like just flapping its wings and pooping on the floor. But like, it was still so fun and funny. And it really was just one of the most phenomenal experiences, getting to just collaborate and have real life become an extension of the art, and vice versa.
Right. That's the goal, right? Art imitates life, or one or the other. Anyway, I can't thank you guys enough for joining me today and for being part of the Paper Mill family and for helping us, tell stories, which is, what we do, stories about families of all kinds. I just am happy to spend this time reconnecting with you and look forward to working with you all again on another project once we're able to bring audiences back here. So I just want to say thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Please don't miss next week when I sit down with creative genius, Tony winner, and Kennedy Center honoree, director and choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler of Bandstand and Hamilton fame. See you then. Bye.